All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to part two of this conversation with myself, Ali J. Taylor from Wisdom and Wayfinder, Frank Majorana from Just Works, and Elissa Zylbershlag. Did I say it correctly?
Great
Yes. All
job.
right.
Great job,
Practice,
Ali.
practice works. From WorkWise Labs. And today we're going to be talking about people first in a time of change, talking about hiring, leadership, and culture. And so, good to see you again, Frank, and welcome back, Elissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So I remember it was funny. So
Yeah.
we had our conversation kind of in preparation of this, and it was good because we had kind of had that spirited debate between like we talk about fit, we talk about kind of skills, where do they land, and it got me thinking. Alyssa, I had a question. So like how do you make sure that when you're looking and you're hiring for the right person, right? That you don't end up being, because you made a comment about like sometimes culture fit is kind of like a dog whistle for bias, right?
Mhm.
How do you combat hiring, making your hiring practice kind of homogeneous, like among like who you're hiring, and still because you're hiring for certain skills, but kind of being aware of that and trying to kind of diversify your hiring practices a little bit. Does that make sense as far as like we're talking about kind of figuring out ways to improve our culture, kind of bring in different point of views, but sometimes when you're hiring, you end up almost feel like you're hiring the same person over and over again.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. So never ask me, Frank, if I have thoughts on something, because the answer is always yes.
I'd love to hear them.
It's what are the thoughts that you have?
What are your thoughts? Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. That's great.
So you talked about hiring the right person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You talked about your setup of the question was about hiring for skills. How do you not keep hiring the same person over and over again?
Yep.
Okay, so first off, ooh, is the sound glitchy? First off, the hiring, there has to be a lot of back work you do on the back end before you even enter into hiring, and creating a picture of the person that you need and the skills that you need. So it's really not the person, it's the skills and the qualifications and like what you need in a person. And sometimes those are hard skills, like they have to have 3 years of experience in X, and those are very important sometimes. And there's also the soft skills part, right? So somebody who can be diplomatic, somebody who can stay calm under stress, like whatever the needs are of that position. So having that back ended, like that back behind the scenes conversation up front is really, really, really important. One of the things that I have found as a hiring manager is that skills can be taught,
Mhm.
the hard skills can be taught. It's the soft skills that are almost more important to make sure you have, because you can't like rework someone's personality. You can't rework someone's being the way that they are. So I have found, unfortunately, through, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, through bad hires that I've made, that I was hiring for skills more than for hiring for hard skills more than the soft skills. And I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle. You can teach, you're going to have to teach the way that your company works anyway. So you're going to have to teach all of that stuff anyway. That's the first thing that I'm thinking when you say that.
Mhm.
I can keep going, or do you want to comment on that?
No, it makes sense from a it's funny when you look at skills, right? You talk about the hard skills, you know about the soft skills. Like a lot of what you do too is to help an organizations develop those soft skills, right?
Right.
Um,
I don't even like that term soft skills because
okay,
it's like really, I think we should be calling them like necessary skills
correct.
or, you know, like they're
Critical
not
skills, yeah.
soft. Critical. Oh, you're always good with words, Ali. Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical skills.
Yeah. Well, I have a question to that. Like, you know, given your work in like the DEI space, the anti-bias space, right? There's also, when we talk about hiring for those critical skills, there's also an aspect of the perception of the person's critical slash soft skills, right? And I'm specifically speaking to some of the bias that occurs when, say, we might interpret a woman who is assertive and direct in her communication, she might be labeled something negative, whereas that same attribute would be labeled something positive if it's coming from a man, right? So how do you I guess manage that, deal with that, assess that when it comes to that, you know, assessment of what somebody's critical skills, soft skills are based on who's in the room and who's making the assessment?
So the first thing with bias is awareness. I
Yeah.
mean, it's if you've never had a conversation before about the difference between assertive and aggressive,
Mhm.
then that's like the place to start. So once you understand that in our culture, women are seen, assertive women are often seen as aggressive.
Mhm.
If you've never had that conversation, awareness, you should be having that conversation. So I'm so glad you're raising it here because a lot of people don't even know that. And so if once you know that, you can then check yourself.
Mhm.
Oh, you know, you interview a woman and you say, "Oh my gosh, she was like really aggressive." And you can say, "Wait a minute, was she aggressive or was she assertive?" And
Yeah.
you can then, but once you have the language, if you don't have the language or the knowledge that it even exists, then how can you question it and check it? So I think awareness is like number one across the board. Like when you talk about bias, I mean, we had a conversation at the dinner table over um, a holiday. Maybe it was Thanksgiving. I'm not sure. No, it wasn't Thanksgiving. We had a conversation over the dinner table with my family, and it was brought to my attention that I guess when I met this woman I met a long time ago, when I met her, she called the color nude, like like taupe color or that like beige
Mhm.
color. She called it nude. And I
Yeah.
said, "Who's nude?" Right? Like I challenged her, like, "Why are you calling that color nude? Who's nude?" So she calls me "Who's nude, Elissa," behind my back, which I'm fine with, right? Because it brought this awareness. And then the conversation at the dinner table was like, "Well, I don't understand that question." And so we ended up having a whole conversation about the color nude and that might be my like that beige might be my color nude, but it's not the
Mhm.
color nude for for you, Ali, right? So and for lots of people in our country. So why are we calling that color nude? And you know, and there was this like awareness at the dinner table the other night by a few members of my family, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I never even thought of that." And so now every time that color comes across, you know, in a box of crayons or
Mhm.
somewhere, that those family members will say, "Oh yeah, who's nude?" Right? Like, and because of that awareness conversation. So when you're not having conversations around these issues and you're not talking about it, you're not learning.
Yeah.
So the assertive, aggressive conversation in hiring, that has to be a conversation.
Yeah, I fully agree, and it's you know, and I didn't bring that. I don't bring that up to anybody that's watching to like create some kind of like guilt or shame around the conversation. It really is just for the awareness of, hey, these are all the interesting sort of things that we kind of learn and sort of intake, and if we don't take the time to question them, right, having a conversation about culture fit, having a conversation about hiring, like if we're really after the best result and what's going to be best for the company in terms of, you know, those critical skills versus those hard skills, you know, we do need to look at, you know, every nook and cranny that we can to make sure that we're getting the best result.
Yeah, and all of the and diversity of all kinds of diversity actually increases productivity in companies because it brings in all different kinds of perspectives. So to what you were talking about earlier, Frank, about like how do you avoid hiring the same people?
Yeah.
Well, you have to be intentional about it. And if you know that you're hiring, like, I'll give an example. 2 jobs ago, for me, I worked at a place and I realized a huge bias I had. All my entire team was women. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't hire men.
Okay.
I have a preference." A bias means a preference for or against.
Yep.
I have a bias for women. And I only hire women. So what did I do? I intentionally started hiring men. Look, here I am with 2 men. This is intentional to me, for me. I'm like, "Oh, good. I'm working towards my goal because I'm interacting and work." And even though you don't work for me, but I'm interacting more with men. I'm bringing men more into my universe. And that's an important thing for me because I have a bias for women.
And so but also you have to make sure that you have the candidate pool, and that's kind of when you talk about being intentional. It's where you sourcing people from, right? Which I get. Sometimes that's possible. Sometimes that's not, right? You go into most elementary elementary education schools. They'll have 1 or 2, like maybe 3 male, first grade teachers, second grade teachers, kindergarten teachers, but a majority of those roles are filled by women because majority of women kind of pursue those careers. So I get that. Quick, so when you look at skills and we're look at hiring the right talk about the right person, right? Do you ever run in, and this kind of goes for both of you, but I'll start with Elissa. Do you ever run into a situation where you have a company where it's growing rapidly, right? I have to hire 10 or 12 or 15 people, and they don't have the time to vet from a person fit standpoint, every single person that comes in to do it. Like, what's the recommendation there? Like, is there any way for an organization that they're scaling quickly to try to get the best people possible without just hiring for solely skills? And Ali, are there
Yeah.
processes that you recommend from an operation standpoint?
Yeah, slow down. That's literally it. Just slow down. Because hold on, my mic. You know, one of the things that we saw, especially with during the pandemic and everything that was happening, a lot of these tech companies, they hired very, very, very quickly. You know, grew their workforce. You know, ballooned their payroll, and then when things sort of returned to, you know, quote unquote normal, right? Then it was like, oh crap, we have this massive payroll. We're not bringing in the revenue that we used to. Now we have to fire all these people. And it's like, you know, it doesn't matter how, you know, what the circumstances were for that kills morale like all around the company, even for those jobs that are deemed, you know, critical or essential or safe or whatnot. To know that, you know, those that are in those positions of leadership didn't do the proper assessment to determine, hey, what's the head count that we're going to need to execute on these growth goals, versus, and then being able to make that decision from, you know, an aligned place or a place that was you know, had a bit of consideration, and then now you have to make this knee-jerk reaction to fire a bunch of people, which never looks good.
And I love what you're talking about, slowing down. That was my gut reaction too. And then you talked about, Ali, raising morale. When you end up having to fire people, it lowers morale. So how do you raise morale? And another instinct that I had when you asked that question, Frank, is who are you including in the hiring process?
Yeah.
Because vetting, saying you don't have time to vet does not sound thoughtful or like it will bring success
Yep.
to a process. So who can you include in the vetting process? Maybe you bring in some people who are not hiring managers. We had one time, we used a woman on our team. She was really good with social media, and we had her go through the social media of everybody and flag anything that would be important to us to know. So she was then included in the hiring process. She wasn't a decision maker, but she was an information gatherer. So who are you including? Who are you bringing in to information gather? If that's where your weakness, if that's the weak point in your system, in your process.
That's really interesting. Could you? I never thought about this, but if someone gets flagged for something on their social media and they meet all the other parameters, are you opening yourself up for a potential lawsuit because you're looking at something outside of necessarily their scope of work, or is that and do you have to share that with the candidate if that's some of the reasons for not going forward? That's really interesting. Like I know everyone looks at social media, but that's an interesting topic.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to talk to
Yeah.
lawsuits. I think it is an interesting question, and to what you just said, everybody looks at social media,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
and the looking at social media, there were things that I saw in this one candidate that were red flags for me, and we ended up hiring her anyway. And I'll tell you, those red flags came to light.
Yeah.
So we did a whole, like, we weighed our options. It was a red flag, but then we were like, we checked ourselves and we were like, is that our bias weighing in or not? And then we decided to hire her. And that red flag ended up like being waved big
Yeah.
time with her. But I mean, people look at social media, and this generation coming up. I mean, I have a 19-year-old. Actually, today's her birthday. She's 19.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
you. And 16-year-old, and the things they post, I'm constantly telling them, like, anything you post is going to be looked at by any hiring manager in the future. So be careful.
Yeah, and with all the things that are happening with AI and technology, and as absurd as it is to me, the proposal that you need 5 years of social media history to potentially enter the country, right? That's something that's being proposed in right now. Whether that actually comes to light or not, it's these. I find that sometimes people, like, these things get thrown out as a test or a measure to see like what they can kind of get away with. So maybe it's not going to be 5 years, maybe it's going to be 3 years, whatever it is. But
who knows?
We know that it's serious enough that this is what society is really looking at. And so a lot of these corporations, that's what they're going to be looking at. They're going to be scouring your social media posts and your threads and your Instagrams and your comments to see, if there's anything they can use to potentially either not hire you or give cause to get rid of you at some point in the future.
Yeah. Our entire lives are out there and available.
So
my last, I worked, the last place that I worked, I had a couple of colleagues who were attorneys who do not have any social media. Like, I was like,
them.
And at first I was like, what? You're nuts. How do you promote yourself? How do you share? How do you meet people? How do you do all of that? Because we use social media in so many different ways. And they were like, this one person in particular who I had this conversation with was like, I don't want that out there. And I seeing the work that they do, I now understand why they don't want that out there. And hey, they do get on in the world just fine without it.
Yeah, if I could go back in time and not sign up for social media, I wouldn't.
Really?
Yeah, 100%.
I
I
typically
don't know.
don't post anything, and I view and consume, but I don't post, and I'll post obviously here and like on LinkedIn and connect with folks. But like, yeah, I try to stay away from posting things because it just kind of, I don't know, it causes a little bit of you know, I don't necessarily. I'm a little bit of a private person, so I
Yeah.
don't necessarily want people to see my world. But
Yeah.
along the lines of culture, right? So if culture's humming and it's really, really good, right? And you're scaling, right? What are things that you think organizations should keep their eye on to make sure that they maintain a great culture, even while they're doubling their workforce or tripling their workforce or moving into another state?
I mean, we talked about a few things already, like awareness of the critical skills, the soft skills, and like really knowing what you're looking at and looking for beforehand. Number two would be taking the time, and Ali said this, slowing down, creating time to do it the right way. Number three would be include people in the process. Figure out a process that works for you and your workplace and your team, and include people in that process. It raises morale. It makes people feel valued. Uh, they may not be decision makers, but um,
Mhm.
so one way we talked about already is having, giving someone an opportunity to vet candidates by going through their social media. Another way in the past that I've used is when we brought candidates in to do a presentation of some sort, because I'm a trainer, so you want to see how they train. So you have them. We always had them do an actual presentation for us. Include the whole team on that
Hmm.
and get feedback from the team. And it also reminds me of a decision-making process that I talk about in my trainings here at WorkWise Labs. Is there's 4 ways you can make a decision: mine, mine with input, yours, or ours. So mine is like, this is a mine decision. I'm going to be the ultimate decider. Mine with input is like, I want to know what everyone thinks, but I'm making the decision. Ours is we all make the decision and we all have equal weight. And yours is, hey, I don't need to make this decision. You guys let me think about it and then let me know
Mhm.
what you decide. So being really
Yeah.
clear on the decision making in that process, if you're including other people, is very important.
Yeah, 100%. I have a similar delegation framework inside of my liberation lab, which is all about like, what's solely in the domain of the business owner, what can be done like with the team, and then what can, if you give the team some guardrails and some guidelines of what they're allowed to make those decisions from, they don't need to check in order to do it. And now it's also folding in what can be done by AI, or utilizing AI to like make some of those decisions where maybe that human relationship, that human touch isn't necessarily critical to the function. But yeah, it all comes down to a lot of what I call pre-decision. You have to pre-decide how you're going to handle certain things. And I think hold on, we got a really great question that just came in from Raheel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He said that times are changing. Can I ask now, with AI job application tools and thousands of applications coming through, how do you filter through the candidate pool? And would it be impossible to assess, interview, and rank these candidates against I'm assuming, job description? So I think we kind of touched upon that, but if you guys want to elaborate a little bit more.
I don't know much about AI job application tools. I have not used them. unfortunately, because sometimes I get 800. I've got, I had to review 800 different resumes, and we came up with different like qualifications, split it up, and all kind of looked through and then ranked, like an A, B, and C. But so I don't know anything about the AI, using AI tools. I know that it's used a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as around ATS, I'm not familiar with necessarily enough of the details of what each of the softwares provide. So I can't give an educated answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are going to use AI, and I think we've been kind of touching upon this throughout this conversation, is that you have to make the pre-decision of what are the qualities that you're looking for, what are the things you need, those critical skills versus the hard skills. And I'm sure that somebody who is much smarter than I and tech enabled can create some type of filter or algorithm to be able to do that with AI. But yeah, I hope that that answers your question, Real.
I don't know if it answers it, but it answers it that we can't answer it really.
Yeah, sometimes that is an answer.
Sometimes that is the answer, is that I don't know. One other thing that we talked about, Frank, in our pre-conversation that I think is a really important tool in hiring, and I really want to share this. I share this with everybody that I work with, and I'd love to share it here too, is when you ask a question, first of all, questions should not be, they need to be open-ended, and they need to be like, tell me a time when this happened. And those are the kinds of questions that you ask that can garner real responses, where you can really evaluate how a person managed themselves in a particular situation. And I love when people say like, this is what I did and I kind of screwed up, but this is what I learned from it. Right. So being really vulnerable as an interviewee in those moments is an important part. It shows honesty. It shows truth. It shows growth mindset. It shows ability to learn and grow and recognize mistakes. And then from the interviewer's standpoint, also, when somebody answers with, I would do this, and you've specifically said, tell me a time when, and they say, I would do this, that's a red flag. And then if you can, I've tried to like correct that, and I say, okay, so that's what you would do, but have you had an experience where this happened, and how did you manage it? And then they say, well, oh, well, what I would do, and they say, and it's shocking when you try to kind of refocus the person, and they like resist the refocusing, and they go back to the I would. That's very telling.
Do you have a recommendation for the interviewees out there that are in the situation where they're asked a question that they freeze up, or they just don't have a reference, or they can't think of one where they like, tell me about a time that you faced adversity. Oh crap, I'm sitting here and I can't think of what. Granted, you've had times in your life where you faced adversity, but you don't necessarily, nothing's coming out. What's your recommendation for those folks?
Be honest. I mean, I'm not even hesitating. Say, I mean, I've had people say in interviews, oh, that's a good question. I can't think of something right now. Can we come back to that? Yeah. Say that. Yeah. Say, I don't want to make something up, just be yourself. That is the biggest recommendation. Be who you are, because when you go into that job, you are going to be who you are. And I know that's so much easier said than done. And interviews are so stressful, and oh my gosh, but figure out your ways. Do you need to breathe? Do you need to, like right before, go to the bathroom and talk to yourself in the mirror? I've totally done that. Like, you've got this, Elissa. You're going to rock it. You're going to like whatever it is that you need to do to remain calm and be yourself. That is it. If you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer. That is the best response as a hiring manager. Like I really respect people who are in this stressful situation who say to me when I ask a question, tell me a time when you faced adversity. And they say, oh, that's a hard one. I can't think of something right now. And okay, let's come back to it. I'd rather you say that. I respect that so much more.
Yeah, or even like what you said before. Like, can we circle back on it? Be like, can I get that answer back to you? Can I respond? Like, if it's not right now, can I at least do it later, or at least get some type of response? Because it happens.
And then
people freeze up sometimes. It's hard, right?
And if it doesn't come out in the interview, it's actually an opportunity for you to do two things. Number one, show that you can follow up on things and that you are a person of your word. And number two, it gives you an opportunity to like think a little bit deeper and have a really good response.
Yeah.
So if you don't answer a question in an interview, write it down. Email it to the hiring manager later.
Yeah.
That will make you stand out. I am a person of my word. I follow up.
I love it.
Yeah, and it also just shows that you're reflecting. You're a reflecting person who's going to take the time to do that. Like, I think we underestimate the value of just being thoughtful. I'll just make commentary just in general. I think we've done a disservice to people by celebrating, loud voices that are just all ego and just, throwing out whatever their thoughts and opinions are without really thinking through them. And we've kind of undervalued those that take the time to really reflect and be thoughtful in their considerate in their answers and responses. We just got a comment from Mary Fran Daly, who said, I like to give interviewees for larger roles the questions prior to the interview. I feel it can bring out authentic stories and cut through some interview anxiety. I say they will be our guidelines and other questions may come up. Yeah, I really like that method too, right? It doesn't mean that like, okay, these are all the questions that I'm going to ask you so that you can like rehearse your answers. But it's like, hey, these are some of the questions that we're going to be pulling from, take some time to prepare.
Yeah, Mary, I think it was Mary Fran was her name. I think that's a fantastic recommendation for anyone listening who's a hiring manager, is to share some of the questions up front. And also, I would add, that is also one of the things that you're supposed to do in conflict. Say, hey, I would love to talk to you about this, right? As a leader, you always want to say what you're going to be talking. I mean, how many times has someone said to you, I'd like a meeting? And then you're like, what's it about? And you panic. So when you're
you get that, we need to talk text.
Yeah, it's not good. Not good.
Yeah, that's what it made me think of, right? If you have to give someone feedback, or you have to, deal with a conflict, to say, hey, we need to talk about what happened in the meeting earlier, or whatever it might be, but putting that out up front. So I love that, Mary Fran. Thank you so much for that addition.
That should be the name of our next webinar. We need to talk.
I love it.
We need to talk.
Context is kindness.
Context is kindness. That is so true.
Yeah. That's so funny.
Yeah.
But so do we have any other questions, Ali?
Yeah, I think here's another good question is what should employees and job seekers, what should they look for in organizations during periods of instability and change? Right? We kind of started off talking about, all the different layoffs and things that are taking place. AI is being cited as the primary reason for a lot of these layoffs. I don't necessarily buy that. I think a lot of times the easiest way for a company to boost its P&L is just to reduce their payroll. But without concrete proof of that, can't really say that that's the case. So with a lot of these changing technologies, a lot of these shifting priorities that are happening, what are the things that that you, in your experience, would think that an employee and a job seeker should be looking out for?
I mean, the first question I have is in what industry, right? So I think there's different things to look for. When I think about, I worked a lot in the nonprofit and government space, so that's kind of my frame of reference. And looking at an organization's 990 and seeing how they spend their money I think is a really helpful tool. And it's all public information on the internet. So you can just, Google their 990 form. Every nonprofit or foundation has to file a 990, and it's public. I think it's a 990. I'm 990% sure that it's a 990, and that's out of 1,000. But but I think that's a really great tool that a lot of people don't use. So seeing how, and that's a form that nonprofits have to put in, that talk about how they spend their money, what percentage of donations go to salaries and actual programming and things like that. So you see how people spend their money, how organizations spend their money.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know what.
No, I was gonna say, Frank, any insight from you on PEO and payroll side? Or?
No, well, from as far as like what when the organs, like what people should be looking for, like in the time of
like if I'm gonna apply, at a job, especially with everything that's going on, what are the things that I should look for?
Yeah, so from every company's different, right? We've spent this entire time talking about culture. You want to look at things like, when you're looking at a particular role, like why is the role open is a great question to ask, right? Are they growing, or are they replacing? I know, from a sales perspective, right? A lot of times you see, the groups will continually turn over the same role over and over again. It's like, what's going on? It's kind of like when you're driving down the street and you're like, that's the fourth time, that location's been a restaurant. Well, maybe you shouldn't put a restaurant there. maybe you go. So you want to kind of be aware of what you're looking into. And from a PEO perspective, this isn't selling PEOs, but what they're able to do is help small businesses with some of the benefits that larger businesses offer. So you want to ask those questions too. Like, what's my benefit package? A lot of people aren't just looking for the highest salaries. They're looking for, other ancillary benefits, whether it's wellness benefits, whether it's like, is there help with adoptions? Is there short-term disability, long-term disability, all these other things, right? It depends on who you are.
Yeah.
But looking at what's important, but also to your point, Elissa, before, is where is the organization? It's very important to generation now is, what are their priorities? What are they invested in? What types of causes are they contributing to? And for some folks that matters a lot, right? So you want to look at all those things.
Yeah, and can I add one more thing, because you sparked a thought for me, Frank, is like from this people perspective, and like this holistic view, that you should be looking at, what are the benefits and what are the things that they offer for you, because when people are looking for a job, they are human. And one of the things that it made me think of is that it's so important to analyze the interviewing process. Are they responding to your emails? Are they letting months go by? Are they explaining the process to you? Are they forthcoming with information? And if they're not, that's how they operate inside. If they're like at the end of the interview saying, okay, well, I want you to know our next step is we will be reaching out to everyone by next week. And then they actually reach out to you by next week. That these are people who are organized, they have their systems, they follow through. If you have people who say to you, oh, well, we'll reach out to you within a week, and you never hear from them, that's their culture. That's okay in their culture. So being like really aware of the interview process itself, it is very telling of the organization that you are applying for and interviewing at.
Yeah, and especially assuming you're coming from a position of strength where you're not interviewing because you need a job, you're interviewing because you want the job. Like you're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. Like
But
it's
even
100%.
Frank,
100%.
even if you really need the job, you're still interviewing them.
Oh no, I completely agree. I completely agree. But the dynamic, the power dynamic, changes a little bit depending upon the person's individual circumstance, right? They're willing to let that 3-day delay in getting back to me not analyze it, right? They're oh, all right, he's
Well, you
probably busy.
justify
They're
it.
willing, you justify it because
Mhm.
you're like, I have no income coming in, and I'm looking. I need a job. That's what I'm saying. If you're
Justify
it,
it.
yep,
You justify it, but it still informs you
it's still informs
of
me.
the culture.
100%, 100%.
And you can decide that you want to overlook that, and you can decide I want to take this job because I need the money, I need, whatever it might
Mhm.
be. And at the same time, it still informs you
Be
on
aware of it. Yep.
the culture that you're going into.
100%. 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, because if they're willing to do that just on the first impression, right, just before you even get into the company, right, you can be, dang sure that that's how they're going to operate later on, right?
100.
Let's
Yep.
let's. Oh, I know that really need this job, so I might push some of those boundaries in terms of like the job description. Like it's not really something that you're supposed to be doing, but
Yeah.
I know that you need the money, so it's like you
100%.
really have to go into it with the both eyes open and really understand what you're both making it like it's a relationship. It's a two-way street.
Yep. Yep. Very much so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So cool. All right. Well, we're coming up on time. Any other final thoughts, tidbits of things that you want to share?
I would love to just say to Raheel, if you have 800 CVs and you have to get through all of them manually, what I always did was I separated it out into different people. We all figured out what the qualifications were and what we were looking
Mhm.
for, and then give people like a week to go through. So if you have like 4 people, everyone's only doing 200. Most of them are not, it's like they're not even qualified, and you don't have to go in a deep dive. And it's also
Mhm.
just like a precursor. So you're just weeding out, and anyone who's might be remotely possible, then you keep them in. But then you make an ABC list, and then you really dive in, and then make, like go
Mhm.
in and you kind of wean it through in a group. But then you only have like 200 to go through. And I used to give myself like 30 minutes. I only was good for like 30 minutes of looking at them.
Okay.
And so I would time block on my calendar, resume review, and I would just give myself like 30 minutes, and then wherever I ended, and then the next day another 30 minutes. And mornings were good for me because that's when I'm fresh. But sometimes people are really good late night when there's nothing else interrupting them. So depending on what your time of day is, that's where you're the freshest.
Mhm.
That reduces bias as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
That's
also,
kind of
congratulations on being a company that's getting 800 resumes and people applying. Because obviously, you're either really popular or doing something really well. So
yeah, government gets that a lot.
yeah.
Like government jobs get that. I don't know, Raheel, if you work for the government, but government jobs will get, you get these massive resume dumps, and it's like, woof, a lot. Well, I want to thank you,
Yeah.
Frank and Ali, for having me here. I love having conversations with you online and in person. So I look forward to many more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I think we should do a schedule follow up in the new year. Let's do another one.
Yep.
Love it.
Keep it going. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Alyssa. Love talking once again. The same thing. I love chatting with you guys. You guys are the best. But no,
We already
appreciate it.
have our next theme, right? Right, Frank?
We need to
We have our
talk.
next theme.
We need to talk.
We
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 need
need
to
to
talk.
talk. But it's all about hey, we need to talk. Good. We need to talk. Yeah, bad.
How about the tone
The
of
tone.
we need to talk?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing ever good happens after we need to talk.
No, no.
This is great, guys. This is awesome. All right. Well, listen,
Yeah.
anyone listening, Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all the good stuff. So
All,
Yep.
Happy Hanukkah, all the
all
good
of it,
stuff,
Hanukkah.
all
and
of it.
Happy
see everyone
Festivus.
soon.
Awesome.
We can air our grievances later.
Absolutely.
Everyone that tuned in, thank you for doing so, and those who submitted their comments and questions. We really appreciate you being a part of this conversation with us. So
Awesome.
take care.
Thank you. Bye.